Emma had always prided herself on being a logical person. She believed she made rational choices, carefully weighing pros and cons before acting. She considered herself immune to common decision-making mistakes, confident that her intelligence and education protected her from bias. But despite her best efforts, she often found herself regretting decisions, making impulse purchases, and falling for persuasive arguments that later seemed irrational. One day, after an exhausting week at work, she sat down to evaluate her recent choices. She had agreed to a project at work that she didn't have time for, bought an expensive gadget she didn't need, and made an emotional decision to sell some stocks based on a market rumor. She couldn't help but wonder, why did I make these choices? Why do I keep falling into the same traps? That's when she stumbled upon Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. She had heard about Kahneman before. He was a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist known for his research on human judgment and decision-making. The book promised to explain the hidden forces shaping our thinking. Intrigued, Emma began reading, and within the first few chapters, she had an epiphany. Her mind was not a single unified system. It was actually composed of two competing systems that influenced how she thought and acted. System 1. Fast, instinctive, and emotional. This was the part of the brain that reacted immediately, recognizing faces, making snap judgments, and responding to danger. It operated automatically and unconsciously. System 2. Slow, deliberate, and analytical. This was the part of the brain that took effort to engage, solving math problems, planning long-term strategies, and thinking through complex issues. It required focus and energy. Emma was shocked to realize that most of her daily decisions were being controlled by System 1. Even in situations where she believed she was thinking rationally, her brain was cutting corners, relying on shortcuts and making quick assumptions. She had been living under an illusion of rationality, when in reality, her instincts were often misleading her. As she continued reading, she uncovered one mental trap after another, biases and illusions that had shaped her thinking without her even realizing it. She saw how these concepts applied to finances, relationships, career decisions, and even political beliefs. Determined to take back control of her mind, Emma set out to apply Kahneman's lessons in her daily life. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Intuition. When your gut misleads you. The myth of trusting your gut. Many people believe that intuition is a sign of intelligence. They trust their gut instincts and assume that quick decisions reflect confidence and expertise. But Daniel Kahneman, in Thinking Fast and Slow, warns that intuition is often unreliable, especially in situations where complexity, bias, or emotions are involved. Kahneman explains that our brains operate using two systems. System 1, fast thinking, intuitive, automatic, and emotion-driven. System 2, slow thinking, deliberate, rational, and effortful. While System 1 helps in routine decisions, e.g., recognizing faces or driving familiar routes, it often misleads us in complex, high-stakes decisions because it relies on heuristics, mental shortcuts, rather than careful analysis. Emma's experience. A lesson in misplaced trust. Emma had always prided herself on her strong intuition. She believed her gut instincts were reliable, especially in hiring decisions. Once, she had hired an employee based solely on a first impression. The candidate was confident and charismatic, well-spoken and persuasive, impressive in a short interview. Emma's System 1 brain instantly decided, this person is perfect. Convinced by her intuition, she skipped a thorough background check. The result? Months later, she deeply regretted her decision. The new hire lacked essential skills, underperformed, and caused disruptions in the workplace. She had been fooled by a cognitive bias called the halo effect, mistaking confidence for competence. Why intuition fails in complex decisions. Kahneman identifies three major reasons why intuition can be misleading. 1. Cognitive biases. Our brain takes shortcuts, leading to errors in judgment. Example, the halo effect makes us assume that someone who is confident must also be skilled. 2. Overconfidence. We tend to believe we are more accurate than we actually are. Example, studies show that even experts, like doctors and financial analysts, often make errors when relying on intuition rather than data. 3. Emotional influence. Emotions skew rational thinking. Example: if we like someone, we may ignore red flags and overlook objective weaknesses. Practical strategies. How to avoid the intuition trap. 1. Don't rely solely on gut feelings. If something feels right, always back it up with data and analysis. Use structured decision-making tools like pros and cons lists, scorecards, or blind evaluations. 2. Slow down and engage system. 2. Thinking. For important decisions, take time to analyze the situation rationally. Ask yourself, am I reacting emotionally or am I considering all the facts? 3. Watch out for first impressions. Confidence does not always mean competence. Use objective criteria, e.g., skills tests, background checks, to evaluate decisions. 4. Seek a second opinion. Get feedback from a neutral third party before making big decisions. Kahneman advises using pre-mortem analysis. Imagine that your decision has failed and work backward to identify potential mistakes. While intuition can be helpful in some situations, it should never be the sole basis for important decisions. By recognizing its limitations and applying structured, logical thinking, we can make smarter, more informed choices. Chapter 2. The anchoring effect. When numbers trick your mind. How your brain gets trapped by the first number you see. Have you ever walked into a store, seen an expensive item, and then felt relieved when you found a cheaper one, only to realize later that even the bulk cheaper option was still overpriced? This is the anchoring effect, a cognitive bias, where the first number we see heavily influences our decision-making, even if it's arbitrary or irrelevant. Emma's experience. How anchoring distorted her perception. Emma once visited a car dealership, excited but unsure about pricing. The first car she saw had a $50,000 price tag. It seemed expensive, but she didn't think much of it. Later, she found another car for $35,000. Compared to the first one, this seemed like a great deal. So she quickly made the purchase. The reality, the $35,000 car was still above her budget, and she could have negotiated further. But her brain had anchored to the initial $50,000 figure, making the second car seem like a bargain even though it wasn't. This is why stores display premium-priced items first, so everything else looks cheaper in comparison. How the anchoring effect manipulates you. Kahneman explains that anchoring is a subconscious process. Even when we know we're being influenced, our brain still struggles to ignore the first number we see. Common examples of anchoring in daily life. Retail pricing. A store first shows you a $200 shirt, making the $80 shirt look like a bargain, even if it's still overpriced. Negotiations. A seller quotes a high initial price, making any discount seem like a win, even if the final price is still high. Real estate. A house originally listed at $500,000, but later reduced to $450,000 seems like a deal, even if it's still overvalued. Salary expectations. If you expect $80,000, but an employer first offers $60,000, your mind adjusts downward, making $65,000 feel reasonable. Practical strategies to outsmart anchoring. 1. Be aware of the first number you see. Recognize when an anchor is influencing your perception. Ask yourself, would I still think this is a good deal if I hadn't seen the first price? 2. Set your own reference point. First, before shopping or negotiating, decide your budget or ideal price before seeing any offers. Example: before buying a car, research average prices before visiting dealerships. 3. Take a step back. When making big purchases, wait a day before deciding. This helps reset your brain's bias. 4. In negotiations, be the first to set the anchor. If you're negotiating, state your price first. This sets the anchor in your favor. Example: when discussing salary, state a high but reasonable figure first, so the employer's counteroffer is closer to your target. By recognizing when numbers are influencing your decisions, you can avoid overpaying, make smarter choices, and negotiate better deals. Chapter 3. Loss aversion. Why we fear losing more than we love winning. The psychology of loss. Why losing hurts more than winning feels good? Have you ever noticed that losing money, opportunities, or possessions feels far worse than gaining the same amount feels good? Kahneman's research, based on prospect theory, proves that the pain of losing $100 is about twice as intense as the joy of gaining $100. This psychological bias, called loss aversion, makes people irrational when dealing with losses. How loss aversion affects decisions. Investing mistakes. Investors hold on to failing stocks, hoping they'll recover, instead of selling at a small loss and reinvesting wisely. Gambling behavior. Gamblers keep playing after losses, chasing their money and often falling deeper into debt. Staying in bad situations. People remain in bad jobs, toxic relationships, or failed businesses just because they've already invested time, money, or effort, rather than cutting their losses and moving on. Emma's experience. Stuck in a failing business. Emma experienced loss aversion firsthand. She had a business partnership that wasn't working, but she kept investing money, time, and effort, refusing to admit failure. She thought, "I've already spent so much on this. If I quit now, it'll all be for nothing." Months later, the partnership collapsed anyway, leaving her in debt and frustration. Looking back, she realized she should have cut her losses sooner instead of letting fear hold her back. How to overcome loss aversion. 1. Ask yourself, if I were starting fresh, would I make the same decision? This mental trick helps you evaluate decisions objectively. Example, if you weren't already invested in a bad job or failing stock, would you choose it today? If not, consider letting it go. 2. Separate emotion from rational thinking. Acknowledge the sunk cost fallacy. Just because you've spent money or time doesn't mean you should keep investing. Make decisions based on future value, not past losses. 3. Set predefined limits on risk. When investing or gambling, decide in advance how much you're willing to lose and stick to it. This prevents emotional decision-making when things go south. 4. Focus on future gains, not past losses. Instead of thinking, "I've lost too much to quit now," shift your mindset to, "What's the best decision for my future?" Letting go of bad investments or relationships frees up time, money, and energy for better opportunities. Loss aversion is a mental trap. It makes us cling to bad decisions instead of making rational, forward-thinking choices. The key: learn to let go when needed, because moving forward is more valuable than holding onto a sinking ship. Chapter 4. The Availability Heuristic. When memories distort reality. How your brain tricks you with easily remembered information. The availability heuristic is a cognitive bias, where people overestimate the likelihood of events based on how easily they can recall examples. For instance, fear of plane crashes. Even though flying is far safer than driving, many people are terrified of flying because plane crashes are highly publicized and easy to recall. Overestimating crime rates. People think violent crime is rising because of sensational news reports, even when actual crime data shows a decline. Gambling fallacies. Casino players remember their big wins more than their losses, falsely believing they have a better chance of winning. Emma's experience. When news distorted her perception, Emma realized how this bias affected her when she saw a news report about a rare home invasion. Even though her neighborhood had a low crime rate, she suddenly became obsessed with installing security cameras, double-checking door locks, and avoiding going out at night. What changed? Not the actual risk, but her perception of risk due to a vivid story. How to overcome the availability heuristic. 1. Look at actual statistics, not just memorable stories. If you're afraid of flying, compare air travel safety statistics to car accident data. If crime worries you, check official crime rates in your area rather than relying on media coverage. 2. Recognize that media focuses on rare dramatic events. News outlets prioritize shocking, emotional stories to attract attention. Just because an event makes headlines doesn't mean it's common or likely to happen to you. 3. Make decisions based on probability, not fear. Ask, what are the real odds of this happening? Don't let emotional reactions dictate your decisions. Use data and logic. The availability heuristic makes us fear rare dangers while ignoring everyday risks. By focusing on data instead of emotions, we can make smarter, more rational decisions, whether it's about safety, investing, or everyday life choices. Chapter 5. The Planning Fallacy. Why we underestimate time and costs. Why we're always too optimistic about deadlines. The planning fallacy is a cognitive bias where people consistently underestimate how long tasks will take. Even when they have past experience proving otherwise, students think they can finish a term paper in one night, but end up pulling an all-nighter. Startups predict they'll be profitable in 6 months. Yet, it takes years. Home renovations that were supposed to take a few weeks stretch into months. Emma's case. She believed she could finish a major project in 2 weeks, only to realize she needed a month. Something that had happened to her before. Why do we keep making this mistake? Optimism bias. People assume things will go smoothly, ignoring past delays and challenges, ignoring past experiences. Even if a task took longer last time, we convince ourselves it will be different now. How to overcome the planning fallacy. 1. Double your estimated time for big projects. If you think a task will take 1 week, assume it will take 2. 2. Look at past experiences. Before setting a deadline, ask, how long did a similar task take before? 3. Plan for unexpected obstacles. Assume things will go wrong and build in buffer time. 4. Use outside perspectives. Ask colleagues, mentors, or past project participants for realistic timelines. By acknowledging delays and planning for setbacks, you can make better schedules, reduce stress, and meet deadlines more effectively. In conclusion, by the time Emma finished thinking fast and slow, she had a new awareness of how her mind worked. She no longer let snap judgments and cognitive biases control her actions. Instead, she started applying Daniel Kahneman's insights to make smarter, more deliberate decisions. Emma's key changes. Pausing before making quick decisions. She learned to stop and reflect rather than relying on gut instincts, questioning whether System 1 was misleading her. Instead of blindly trusting her first reaction, she analyzed if biases were at play, using System 2 for important choices. For investments, hiring, and long-term planning, she engaged slow, analytical thinking. Why this matters? Kahneman's book is more than a study of psychology. It's a guide to mastering decision-making. By understanding our mental shortcuts and biases, we can think more critically instead of making impulsive mistakes, make better financial, career, and life choices, avoid falling for common cognitive traps that lead to poor decisions. Final takeaway. Before making your next big decision, ask yourself, am I relying on instinct, or am I thinking critically? Could I be falling for a bias or illusion? What would System 2 say about this choice? By applying these insights, you can outsmart your brain, avoid costly mistakes, and take control of your future.